everyone. Welcome back to Fuckery 101. I'm Lori Eberly, and today we are talking about flooding. No, not the kind when the waters rise, but when the emotions spill out in large quantities beyond what we can really contain, and we flood everyone around us with our own stuff. So, flooding is deeply related to how well we've established personal boundaries, how well we understand ourselves, our level of self-awareness, our level of emotional intelligence, and how we have the skills, or lack of skills, of when we're having a really large emotional experience, knowing place, context, all of the factors that are involved. How am I showing up in a way that does not damage trust, that does not overwhelm others, that does not make myself the center of attention? Okay, so that's a little bit about flooding. What I'd like to do is go through a couple different ways that I visualize this. And this goes back to like 1993 or something, when I was getting my undergraduate degree in social work, and the first time I was really ever in a course that talked about boundaries. And what I've learned as an adult is that most of us have not had any kind of formal training on what boundaries are, how we set them, how we respect them, and yet it's one of the primary ways that we cause harm and damage trust at work, by not understanding and setting our own boundaries, and by not understanding, respecting other people's boundaries. So this is how it was taught to me. If you think about a cell, and you think about a porous cell, right? Porous meaning things can go in and out. If we don't have strong boundaries, right? So right here, there's not strong boundaries because there's big gaps here, okay? That means lots of stimulus from the outside world can get in to our psyche with a lot of ease, okay? So it means that what my boss says is greatly impacting me. The way that you looked at me is greatly impacting me. The fact that I'm not having enough sleep, that all of these things are coming at me, okay? Not only is there a lot that's able to get in and penetrate my boundaries, but also I am struggling to regulate my own emotions, and so every feeling of anger is coming out. All my feelings of jealousy, of inadequacy, of not being good enough, of jealousy, of overwhelm, whatever my emotional experience is, there's not really any kind of boundary, gate, line to regulate and with intention decide, am I gonna let this door open or not? Am I going to share this part of myself with someone else or not, right? There's not a lot of that intention wrapped up in a person that has overly porous boundaries or poor boundaries or inadequate boundaries, right? And that doesn't make people bad. It means that they probably have not seen healthy boundaries modeled in their early family relationships, in their friendships, in their other relationships, right? Because we tend to not learn directly about boundaries. We just sort of are making this shit up as we go along. All right. Then let's go down here to the opposite of that, right? These are incredibly fixed boundaries. In this circle, there's not really any doors. There's not really any openings for information, feelings, other people's responses to get in. And I'm also really keeping things very tight and guarded, so you're not gonna see a lot of me, okay? When I experience, it doesn't mean I won't experience overwhelm or big emotions. It just means that they do not show up here, right? That I might work especially hard, consciously or unconsciously, to bury, to subvert, right? So compared to this, if this person is experiencing sadness during the day and I'm flooded with my sadness, you're going to read that all over my body language. I'm going to be sobbing uncontrollably, and not because I've had a death in the family or a major rupture in a relationship or just find out I had cancer, right? Those are very context-centric. But that I am feeling so overwhelmed with my sadness that I cannot hold it together in any regard. And that sadness may not match sort of what societal norms are. Now, I do need to add in here that cultural norms vary all over the place, and what qualifies as appropriate sharing of emotions is going to vary widely, right? And of course, that's also really influenced by gender and by race and by age and by ethnicity and all sorts of things, right? So all of that is context, but I'm still saying sort of like within the range, this is someone who every single thing that they feel, everybody feels, as opposed, and the words that I wrote here that might indicate that you have overly open boundaries, easily overwhelmed, constantly in a state of chaos. I think the word drama is overused, but if it's like, oh, Lori, she's just so much drama, probably indicating poor personal boundaries. And there's an over flexibility, right? Like that I am a doormat, that if you call me up at 9 o'clock and say, Lori, I need you to work on this for me, that I don't have those personal boundaries to say, I'd be happy to prioritize this tomorrow morning, right? Or, you know, my weekends are for time that I spend with my family or with my friends, and so I won't be working on that this weekend, right? That's personal boundaries. This is not being able to say no to anything. It's just completely indiscriminate, okay? Where down here, it looks very shut down. It looks rather rigid, inflexible, guarded. You know, these folks are sometimes seen or perceived as cold. Sometimes that's related to being shy or really introverted, but the perception is Lori's very walled off. Lori's, you can't tell what she's thinking, right? There's like kind of a flatness here. And that makes our nervous systems very uneasy. We actually would prefer to see anger or even if it's an emotion that creates discomfort, most of us prefer to see that than what's bubbling or brewing underneath the surface, right? Because then we don't know what we're looking at, okay? So this is not really having many openings at all. Where we're going in aiming for healthy boundaries, because healthy boundaries translate into healthy communication and healthy relationships, is that, see, there's still this dotted line here. It's still porous. I'm still allowing information, other people's experiences, other people's opinions to come in. But, and I'm also able to share my own opinions, and I'm able to share my own ideas, and I'm able to like be honest and vulnerable in my relationships. But it's discriminate this time compared to this. And I might have a gate here because I've tried to be open and honest with Stacy in the past, and when that happened, she betrayed me. When that happened, she hurt me. So I've now established a gate there. Doesn't mean that I don't remain open and trusting in other relationships, but I have a gate there related to Stacy and Stacy's fuckery, right? It means that I'm still able to be transparent and open and honest about what's happening for me personally, but it's not overshadowing what else is going on. It doesn't mean that I'm totally flat and disconnected, and it doesn't mean that I am so overwhelmed in my own stuff that I'm projecting and flooding all of my emotions onto everybody else in the office, right? So this is what we're aiming for, that I can be open and flexible. There's this level of fluidity, and you can sense that in the nervous systems of people that have healthy boundaries. because there's a level of confidence that comes with that, and it requires a really high level of self-awareness. It means that I have the ability to say no. It means I have the ability to change my mind. I can still feel really strongly about something, but I'm not so rigid in my boundaries that I'm unable to be swayed. And if these little dotted lines or fixed lines aren't working for you, I'd also like to show you this, because I think that this also really helps us understand. Like right now, this sphere would be so open that anyone else's ideas, thoughts, feelings can easily pass through this boundary, right? And I could be attacked. I am really in a vulnerable place when I am this open. And likewise, if I was flooding, if my nervous system was really having a hard time regulating my emotional experience, everything that I'm feeling here and here is going to come through, right? Because really open boundaries. Likewise, this is small, right? To me, there's this sort of like hunching over. I'm keeping my cards really close. And again, not judgment about this. There's a lot of reason wrapped up in trauma and pain, lots of times, as to why people might be like this. So I'm not saying you need to be like this or you're not a good person or leader. And I'm not saying to be closed or shut down is a bad thing. It's a response, right? But what does it mean if we can be flexing of our boundaries? What does it mean that if I'm in a relationship with folks at work where we're able to collaborate, where we're able to share ideas, where we're respectful, where there's good accountability? See how dynamic this is? See how, like, if someone's new on a team, our boundaries might be more like this, right? Because we don't know people yet. And as we get to know people, we open ourselves up more, and there's days where we're flooded because we're living through a freaking pandemic and we've been out protesting all night, or we've been dealing with microaggressions for the last 30 years, and our ability to keep out those microaggressions and hateful things, the huge fuckery like racism and sexism and anything that makes people feel small, when we've been hurt, it's naturally a response to do this. So I want you to sort of look at yourself baseline. Do I have overly open boundaries that let too much in constantly? And am I constantly projecting stuff out without much intention or ability to regulate that? Am I living life kind of small and not trusting folks? I have my reasons, but can I better understand what my reasons are? And what would it be like if I could open myself up just a little bit more? How can I be discerning? Who is one person in my working environment, right? Like a colleague, a customer, a vendor, whoever that is. What would it mean to develop trust? And as we develop trust and as we know our own boundaries, we form healthy relationships and healthy communication patterns that allow us to be honest about who we are, respectful about who other people are. And that's where we get to replacing fuckery and bringing in more elements of belonging and equity and inclusion. It starts with knowing where you're at and taking one step towards healthy, important, self-respecting boundaries. Do the work.